My stepmother sat across the aisle, dabbing fake tears while my father refused to meet my eyes. They believed this trial was just about an inheritance worth millions, but they had forgotten the gift tag she tore from my hands 10 years ago. I ran my tongue over the scar on my lip, remembering the taste of copper. She thought she stole my future that Christmas Eve, but she only handed me the weapon to destroy hers. My name is Melissa Robbins, and nearly 30 years of life had culminated in this sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway inside the Northbridge County Courthouse. I stood near the heavy oak doors of Courtroom 4, adjusting the cuff of my blazer, feeling the familiar cold steel of my watch against my wrist. To anyone passing by, I looked like just another attorney preparing for a mundane procedural hearing. I had the posture, the tailored suit, and the unreadable expression of someone who spent her days dissecting lies for a living. They would never guess that today. I was not the hunter. Today, I was the defendant. The air in the courthouse always smelled the same to me. It was a mixture of floor wax, stale coffee from the vending machines down the hall, and the distinct, metallic scent of anxiety. As a lead legal investigator for the Briarstone County Bureau of Justice, I usually thrived in this environment. I was the one who walked into rooms like this carrying binders full of damning evidence against white-collar criminals and fraudsters. I was the one who made the guilty sweat before they even took the stand. But this morning, the humidity in the air felt heavier, pressing against my skin like a physical weight. I was not here to dismantle a Ponzi scheme or expose a corrupt city councilman. I was here to fight for the legacy of the only man who had ever truly loved me. I checked my watch. It was 8:45 in the morning, 15 minutes until the proceedings began. Then, I saw them. The elevator doors at the far end of the corridor slid open with a soft chime, and my breath caught in my throat for a fraction of a second before I forced my lungs to expand again. Victoria Hale stepped out first, followed closely by my father, Daniel Hale. Seeing them in the flesh after so many years felt like looking at a photograph that had been left out in the sun. Familiar, yet distorted and washed out. Victoria was a masterpiece of calculated grief. She wore a black dress that was modest enough for court, but expensive enough to signal her status. Paired with a string of pearls that I recognized from a magazine spread she had forced my father to buy 5 years ago. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon, and she dabbed at perfectly dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. She was playing the role of the bereaved daughter to perfection. Beside her walked Colton Price, her attorney. I knew Price by reputation. He was a shark in a 3-piece suit, a man who specialized in contesting wills and destroying families for a 30% contingency fee. He whispered something to Victoria, and she nodded bravely. A performance art piece entitled The Victim. And then there was Daniel, my father. He walked a step behind them, his shoulders hunched in that perpetual posture of non-confrontation he had perfected over 2 decades. He looked older than I remembered, his hairline receding, the lines around his mouth etched deeper by years of living beyond his means and bending to his wife's will. He did not look at me. He scanned the floor tiles, the ceiling, the exit sign, anything to avoid locking eyes with the daughter he had abandoned long before he actually left. He was trying to project the image of a man torn between 2 worlds, the heartbroken father whose daughter had inexplicably turned against him. It was a lie, of course. He had made his choice years ago. I remained still, leaning against the wall, my arms crossed. I did not flinch when they passed me. Victoria's eyes flicked toward me, and for a split second, the mask slipped. There was no grief in that gaze. There was only cold, hard calculation, and a simmer of hatred that she had nurtured since I was a child. She looked at me not as a stepdaughter, but as an obstacle to a bank account. Then, just as quickly, the mask was back in place. She sniffled audibly as Price held the door open for her. "Showtime," a voice murmured beside me. I turned to see Noah Mercer, my attorney and one of the few people in this world I trusted implicitly. Noah was the opposite of Colton Price. He did not wear flashy suits or practice theatrics. He wore comfortable corduroys, and carried a battered leather briefcase, but he possessed a mind like a steel trap. "Are you ready for this, Melissa?" he asked, his voice low. "Price is going to come out swinging. He is going to try to paint you as the villain before you even sit down." "Let him," I said, my voice steady. "He thinks he is fighting a 19-year-old girl who ran away from home. He has no idea who I am now." We entered the courtroom. The gallery was sparsely populated, mostly by curious onlookers and a few local reporters hungry for a scandal involving a prominent late judge's estate. I took my seat at the defense table, keeping my back straight, my hands folded on the mahogany surface. Across the aisle, Victoria and Daniel sat close together, their hands clasped on the table like a united front against the storm. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge Helena Brooks presiding." Judge Brooks swept into the room, her black robes billowing. She was a woman of 60 with eyes that missed nothing. She took her seat, arranged her files, and looked out over the courtroom, over the rim of her reading glasses. Her gaze swept over the plaintiff's table, acknowledging Price with a curt nod, and then settled on me. I saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes. 3 years ago, I had been the lead investigator on a complex wire fraud case that had landed in her courtroom. I had spent hours testifying before her, walking the jury through a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts. Judge Brooks knew my work. She knew I was meticulous, ethical, and relentlessly logical. She knew I was not the chaotic, manipulative girl described in the complaint filed by Victoria and Daniel. That recognition was a weapon, but I kept it sheathed. I simply nodded to her, a professional courtesy. "We are here in the matter of the estate of Leonard Whitlow," Judge Brooks said, her voice commanding the room. "Counsel for the plaintiffs, you may proceed with your opening statement." Colton Price stood up, buttoning his jacket with a flourish. He walked to the center of the room, positioning himself so he could make eye contact with the few people in the gallery. "Your Honor," Price began, his voice dripping with faux sincerity, "this case is a tragedy not just of a lost life, but of a family destroyed by manipulation and greed. We are here today because Leonard Whitlow, a man of great esteem, was isolated in his final years. He was cut off from his loving daughter, Victoria, and his devoted son-in-law, Daniel. And who was the architect of this isolation?" He turned and pointed a finger directly at me. "Melissa Robbins," he declared, "a granddaughter who used her grandfather's vulnerability to poison his mind against his own flesh and blood. She moved into his home, controlled his communications, and coerced a dying man into signing a will that left his entire estate, valued at over $5 million, solely to her. We will prove that Ms. Robbins is not a grieving granddaughter, but a cold, calculating manipulator who preyed on the elderly to settle a childhood grudge." I sat like a statue. I did not frown. I did not shake my head. I let his words wash over me, absorbing the venom. They were painting a portrait of a monster, a caricature of a spoiled brat who wanted all the toys for herself. It was a good story. It was the kind of story that won juries over. But as Price droned on about undue influence and mental incapacity, my mind drifted. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom blurred, and suddenly, I was not 30 years old. I was 19. The smell of the courtroom faded, replaced by the sharp, pine scent of a Christmas tree. The hum of the air conditioner became the crackle of a fireplace in a mansion in Stonehaven Hills. I could feel the cold draft from the window and the overwhelming sense of not belonging. I was standing in the foyer of my father's house. I had come to offer an olive branch, to try one last time to be a family. I had brought nothing but myself in the hope that perhaps, just this once, I would be welcome. I remembered the box under the tree. It was small, wrapped in silver paper. My grandmother, Ruth, had whispered to me before we left her house that Leonard had prepared it specifically for me. "Open it tonight," she had said. "He wants you to have it." I remembered reaching for it after the guests had left. I remembered Victoria's voice, shrill and intoxicated, slicing through the air. "You think you deserve that?" she had spat. "After your father has spent a fortune supporting that old man and you? You are a leech, Melissa, just like your mother was. I had tried to defend myself. I had tried to defend my grandparents. Then came the slap. It wasn't a disciplinary swat. It was a full-force backhand from a grown woman to a young adult. The force of it had thrown me off balance. I had stumbled, my hip colliding with the sharp edge of the mahogany console table. I remembered the stinging heat spreading across my cheek, the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth where my tooth had cut into my inner lip. I remembered looking down at the gift in my hands, dazed, my vision swimming. Attached to the silver ribbon was a small, cream-colored tag. In Leonard's elegant, shaky handwriting, it read, "To Melissa, from the one who chose you when no one else did." From the one who chose you. Then, the memory shifted to violence. Victoria's manicured claws snatching the box from my hands, the sound of paper tearing, the tag fluttering to the floor, ripped in half. "This house doesn't need his charity," she had screamed. And Daniel, my father, standing on the stairs, a Scotch glass in his hand, looking down at me with empty eyes. "Don't make a scene. Melissa," he had said, "just go." "Ms. Robbins?" The voice brought me back to the present. I blinked, the courtroom snapping back into focus. Noah was looking at me, concern etched in his brow. Colton Price had finished his opening statement and was sitting down, looking smug. "I am fine," I whispered to Noah. I reached up and absent-mindedly touched the faint, white scar on my lower lip. It was barely visible now, hidden under lipstick and years of healing, but I could feel the ridge of tissue. It was my reminder. It was the physical proof that their narrative of a happy family was a lie constructed on a foundation of violence and silence. "Your Honor," Noah said. Standing up, he did not walk to the center of the room. He stood behind his chair, grounding himself. "The defense will not be engaging in theatrical storytelling today. The plaintiff speaks of manipulation. We speak of facts. The plaintiff speaks of a family torn apart by a granddaughter. We will present evidence of a family that abandoned a child, and a grandfather who stepped in to save her. This case is not about $5 million. It is about the truth of a lifetime." Judge Brooks nodded slowly. "Very well. I want witness lists finalized and any new physical evidence submitted to the clerk by noon. We will reconvene at 1 o'clock for the first testimony." Price leaned over to Victoria, whispering something that made her dab her eyes again. They looked so confident. They thought this was a standard probate case. They thought they were fighting a bitter daughter who would crumble under pressure. They had no idea that for the past 10 years, while they were spending money they didn't have and playing socialites, I had been learning how to hunt. They didn't know about the files. They didn't know about the timeline I had constructed, day by day, transaction by transaction, and they certainly didn't know about the one thing I had spent the last decade searching for, the missing piece of that Christmas Eve. I looked at Victoria one last time as the bailiff announced the recess. She caught my eye, and a flicker of unease passed over her face, as if she sensed a shift in the barometric pressure of the room. "Go ahead and cry, Victoria," I thought, running my thumb over the scar on my lip one last time. "Tell your story. Make yourself the victim. Because when I take the stand, and when I bring out what I have found, you will never be able to speak over me again." This was not just a trial. It was an execution of the past, and I was finally holding the axe. To understand the woman standing in the Northbridge County Courthouse, you have to understand the girl who grew up in Willow Creek. It was a small, sleepy town that felt like it existed in a different century compared to the glass and steel skyline of the city where my father and stepmother lived. My world was defined by the smell of cedarwood, yeast rising in a warm oven, and the dusty, comforting scent of old law books. I did not grow up in a broken home. I grew up in a home that had been carefully glued back together by two people who had no obligation to do so, other than the fierce, quiet love they held for a granddaughter who had been left behind. My grandparents, Leonard and Ruth Whitlow, lived in a sprawling, single-story craftsman house with a wraparound porch that creaked when the wind blew. It was the kind of house that felt alive, A place where the floorboards groaned in sympathy when you had a bad day and the windows seemed to frame the sunlight just to cheer you up. For the first 10 years of my life, I lived in a state of confused waiting. My father, Daniel, and his new wife, Victoria, were like comets. They were bright, flashy, and they appeared on an unpredictable schedule that had nothing to do with my needs and everything to do with their convenience. They would arrive in a cloud of expensive perfume and exhaust fumes, usually driving a new luxury sedan that my father would make a point of parking in the center of the driveway. They would stay for 3 hours, maybe 4. They called these visits. I called them performances. They always had a reason for leaving. It was always about the future. "We have a big project launching in the city," Daniel would say, checking his gold watch for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. "We are doing this for the family. Melissa, we are building a legacy." "The market is volatile right now," Victoria would add, smoothing down a skirt that cost more than my grandmother's entire wardrobe. "We have to be on call. You understand, don't you, sweetie?" I would nod, because that is what children do. I would stand on the porch and wave as they drove away, watching the red taillights disappear around the bend of the old oak tree, feeling a hollow ache in my chest that felt like hunger, but food never fixed it. The ache was sharpest in the school auditorium. I remember the spring recital when I was 8 years old. I had been practicing the violin for 4 months. It sounded terrible, mostly screeching and missed notes, but to me, it was a symphony. Every child had been given 2 tickets for their parents. I had taken a black marker and written Mom and Dad on 2 pieces of construction paper, taping them to the metal folding chairs in the 2nd row. I stood on the stage, clutching my violin, the stage lights blinding me. I scanned the darkness of the audience. I saw the silhouette of my grandfather's broad shoulders. I saw the soft curve of my grandmother's hair. But next to them, the 2 chairs remained empty. The pieces of construction paper were white squares in a sea of people. I played my song. I missed the 3rd measure entirely. When I finished, Leonard and Ruth stood up. They clapped so hard I thought their hands would sting. My grandfather whistled, a sharp, piercing sound that made the principal jump. They were cheering for 2. They were cheering for 4. They were trying to fill the silence left by the people who had promised to be there, but had found something more important to do. That night, Ruth made apple pie. She did not say anything about the empty chairs. She just set a heavy ceramic bowl on the counter and handed me the flour. "The secret is in how you treat the dough, Melissa," she told me, her hands dusted with white powder. "You have to be patient. You cannot force it. If you rush it, it gets tough. If you nurture it, it becomes something wonderful." She wasn't talking about the pie. We both knew that. We stood there in the warm yellow light of the kitchen, kneading the dough, and the smell of cinnamon and apples slowly pushed the memory of the empty chairs out of the room. If Ruth taught me how to survive the emotional winter, Leonard taught me how to fight. My grandfather was a retired judge, a man who viewed the world through the lens of cause and effect, evidence and verdict. He did not read me fairy tales before bed. He did not care about princes saving princesses. Instead, he sat in his leather armchair, the lamp casting long shadows across the room, and told me about his old cases. He treated them like fables. "There was the case of the man who stole the bread," he would say, his voice deep and gravelly. "The law said he was a thief, but the evidence showed he had 3 children and no job. What is justice, Melissa? Is it following the rule or understanding the reason?" I would sit cross-legged on the rug, wearing my flannel pajamas, and debate him. "He stole," I would say. "That is wrong." "But why did he steal?" Leonard would press, "Context is evidence. Melissa, never look at the action without looking at the circumstance. People lie. Circumstances usually tell the truth." He taught me that tears could be faked, but bank statements could not. He taught me that silence was often an answer. He planted the seeds of the investigator I would become, training my eyes to look past the surface. And it was those trained eyes that began to see Victoria for who she really was. She was not cruel to me in the way evil stepmothers were in books. She did not lock me in the attic or make me scrub floors. Her cruelty was far more sophisticated. It was the cruelty of indifference masked as generosity. When she did visit, she brought gifts. They were always expensive, and they were always wrong. When I was 10 and obsessed with astronomy, wanting nothing but a telescope, she brought me a pink designer handbag. When I was 12 and playing soccer, needing new cleats, she brought me a porcelain doll collection. "It is limited edition," she said, thrusting the box at me without looking at my face. "You will appreciate it when you are older." She would sit on the sofa, sipping the iced tea Ruth made, but her eyes were always on her phone. She was typing, scrolling, checking emails. She was physically in Willow Creek, but her mind was in a boardroom 300 miles away. I would try to tell her about school, about my grades, and she would offer a distracted hum. "That is nice. Sweetie, don't mumble." The turning point, the moment the glass really shattered, happened when I was 14. It was a humid July afternoon. Daniel and Victoria had come for a surprise visit. Claiming they were between business trips, I was in the kitchen, getting a glass of water. The window was open, and the screen did little to block the voices drifting in from the back porch. Victoria was on her phone. She must have thought I was out in the yard with Leonard. I froze, my hand hovering over the faucet. "No, we cannot liquidate that asset yet," Victoria was saying. Her voice was sharp, stripped of the sugary coating she used when she spoke to me. "I know we need the liquidity, but the old man is still alive." There was a pause as she listened to the person on the other end. Then she laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. "He is healthy as a horse. Unfortunately," she sighed. "Look, as long as the old man is alive, there is money. He covers everything for the girl. It saves us $50,000 a year easily. Keeping the girl there is convenient. We do not have to deal with tuition or housing. We just show up, smile, and let him write the checks." I stood there, the blood draining from my face. Convenient. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't even a burden. I was a line item in a budget they were trying to balance. I was free logistics. They left me with my grandparents not because they thought it was better for me, but because it was cheaper for them. I walked out of the kitchen. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I walked straight to the barn where Leonard kept his workshop, and I sat in the hayloft for 3 hours, staring at the dust motes dancing in the light. That was the day the little girl who waited for her daddy died. In her place, something colder began to grow. After that, I started paying attention to the notebooks. Leonard had a habit that I used to find incredibly boring. Every Sunday night, he would sit at his heavy oak desk, put on his reading glasses, and open a black ledger. He would take a stack of receipts and bank slips and record everything. I used to think it was just an old man's obsession with order, but after that phone call, I watched closer. I saw him write checks to Daniel, large checks. Loan for business expansion, he would write in the memo line, or help with Daniel's mortgage, or Victoria's car repair. He never refused them. When Daniel called, his voice tight with fake stress, asking for help, Leonard would sigh, rub his temples, and reach for his checkbook. He knew. I realized then that he knew exactly what they were. He wasn't paying them because he was fooled. He was paying them to keep the peace. He was paying a ransom to keep them from causing trouble, to ensure that I could stay in the sanctuary of Willow Creek without a custody battle. One evening, I asked him about it. I was 16 then. "Why do you give them so much?" I asked, pointing to the ledger. "They never pay you back." Leonard closed the book gently. He looked at me, his eyes tired, but incredibly kind. "Money is just paper." "Melissa," he said, "it is a tool. Sometimes you use a tool to build a house. Sometimes you use it to build a wall to keep the storm out." He reached out and took my hand. His skin was dry and papery, like old parchment. "You have to remember one thing," he told me, his voice firm. "Family is not blood. Blood is just biology. It is an accident of birth. Family is who is there when you need them. Family is who holds the bucket when you are sick. Family is who sits in the chair at the recital. Family is who chooses you." That phrase stuck in my ribs like a hook. Family is who chooses you. It became my armor. It allowed me to survive high school, to survive the infrequent, shallow visits from Daniel and Victoria. I stopped expecting them to be parents. I treated them like distant relatives I was forced to tolerate. I focused on my grades, on the baking lessons with Ruth, on the legal debates with Leonard. I built a life that was full and rich without them. But the human heart is a traitorous thing. Even though I knew they saw me as a convenience, even though I knew Victoria viewed me as an expense and Daniel viewed me as an obligation, a tiny, stupid part of me still wanted them to see me, not the line item, me. I wanted to believe that if I was good enough, smart enough, successful enough, they would finally look at me with the same pride I saw in Leonard's eyes. And that foolish, resilient hope is what led me to make the mistake when I was 19. It was my first year of college. I was studying pre-law. I felt like an adult. I felt capable. And when Christmas approached, I convinced myself that things could be different. I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, if I showed up at their big mansion in Stonehaven Hills, if I stepped into their world on their terms, the gap would close. "Let's go, Grandma," I had said to Ruth. "Let's go to them this year, just for Christmas Eve. Give them one last chance." Ruth had looked at me with sad eyes, but she had nodded. She would walk into fire for me if I asked. I didn't know then that I wasn't walking into a celebration. I was walking into a trap that would leave a scar on my face and a hole in my heart. But mostly, I didn't know that under the tree in that cold, rich house, there was a box waiting for me. A box that contained the final, tangible proof of Leonard's love, and the catalyst for a war that would bring me to a courtroom 10 years later. I packed my bag, I put on my best coat, and I drove us toward the city, toward the lights, toward the end of my childhood. The drive to Stonehaven Hills that Christmas Eve felt less like a holiday visit and more like a funeral procession. I was 19 years old, a freshman in law school, and possessed the naive arrogance of someone who thought she could negotiate with emotional terrorists. I sat in the passenger seat of my grandmother's old sedan, watching the scenery shift from the modest, warm lights of Willow Creek to the imposing, gated driveways of my father's neighborhood. I had convinced Ruth to come. That was the guilt that would sit in my stomach like a stone for years. I had told her that we needed to be the bigger people. I had told her that maybe, just maybe, Daniel and Victoria had changed. I wanted to believe that the magic of the season could melt even the coldest of hearts. I was stupid. I was hopeful. And I was about to learn that hope is a dangerous thing to bring into a house built on greed. When we pulled up to the driveway, the house was blazing with light. It was a sprawling colonial revival, manicured to within an inch of its life. Every shrub was wrapped in uniform white lights. A wreath the size of a tractor tire hung on the front door. It looked like a magazine spread, devoid of any actual human warmth. We were not the only guests. That was the first surprise. My father was hosting a cocktail party for his business associates. When the maid opened the door, the sound of jazz and polite laughter washed over us. I stepped inside, wearing a wool coat that I had bought at a thrift store, feeling instantly underdressed and out of place. Victoria descended the grand staircase like royalty. She wore a shimmering red gown that clung to her frame, a glass of champagne already in her hand. Her smile faltered for a microsecond when she saw us, a glitch in the matrix, before she smoothed it back into a plastic mask of welcome. "Melissa," she said, her voice pitched high for the benefit of the guests, "and Ruth, we were not expecting you until tomorrow." It was a lie. I had emailed her 3 times. "Merry Christmas. Victoria," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we thought we would stop by for the eve, to be with family." She ushered us in, but she did not take our coats. She guided us toward the periphery of the room, away from the important men in suits and their jewelry-laden wives. I watched my father from across the room. Daniel was laughing at a joke made by a man with a thick cigar. He saw me. I know he saw me. His eyes met mine, and then they slid away, glossing over me as if I were a piece of furniture he had forgotten to put in storage. For the next 2 hours, I was a ghost in my father's house. I stood by the buffet table, sipping sparkling water, watching people treat my grandmother with polite confusion. No one introduced us. When a woman with a diamond choker asked who I was, Victoria swooped in before I could answer. "This is a relative from the country," Victoria said, patting my arm with a condescending affection that made my skin crawl. "We try to help them out where we can." I bit my tongue. I was studying contract law. I knew that you did not win an argument by exploding in the middle of the opening statement. I waited. Under the 12-foot Christmas tree, which was decorated with ornaments that probably cost more than my tuition, there was a mountain of gifts. They were wrapped in gold and silver foil, piled high, but nestled near the back, almost hidden by the skirt of the tree, was a small, simple box wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red string. Ruth nudged me and nodded toward it. "That is from Leonard," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "He wanted to come, but his hip was bothering him. He worked on that for months. Melissa, he made me promise you would open it here, tonight. He said it was important." I looked at the box. It seemed out of place among the flashy display of wealth, just like me. By 11 o'clock, the last of the guests had drifted away. The catering staff was clearing the crystal glasses. The house fell into a heavy, oppressive silence. The performance was over, and the reality was setting in. Victoria kicked off her heels and slumped onto the white sofa. The mask was gone. Her face was flushed with alcohol and irritation. She looked at me, and the disdain she had been bottling up all evening finally uncorked. "Well," she said, gesturing vaguely at the room, "I hope you enjoyed the free food. God knows it is the only reason you people come here." I stiffened. "We came to see my father. Victoria." "Your father is tired," she snapped. "He works 18 hours a day to pay for this house, to pay for his life, and to pay for yours." Daniel was standing by the fireplace, loosening his tie. He didn't look at me. He stared into the dying embers. "That is not true," I said, my voice calm but hard. "My grandfather pays for my tuition. He pays for my housing. You haven't sent a check in years." Victoria laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. She stood up and walked toward me, swaying slightly. The smell of expensive wine was heavy on her breath. "And where do you think Leonard gets his money?" she hissed. "He is a retired civil servant. Melissa, he doesn't have a fortune. He has been draining your father for decades. Guilt money. That is what it is. We send him thousands every month so he can play the benevolent patriarch, while we scramble to keep up appearances here." "That is a lie," I said. I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. I thought of Leonard's notebooks. I thought of the checks he wrote to them. I have seen the ledgers. "Victoria, I know who borrows from whom." Her eyes narrowed. I had stepped over the line. I had challenged the narrative. "You ungrateful little brat," she spat. "You are just a leech raised by two old parasites. You think you are better than us because you are reading law books? You are nothing without Daniel's name." She lunged forward. It happened fast, but my memory recorded it in slow motion. She didn't mean to hit me at first. I think she meant to intimidate me. She shoved me hard in the chest. I was wearing heels. I stumbled back. My hip caught the sharp corner of the heavy oak console table behind me. Pain shot up my side, a white-hot flash that made me gasp. I tried to regain my balance, raising my hand to steady myself. Victoria took that as aggression. She swung her arm. Her palm connected with the side of my face with a cracking sound that echoed in the high ceilings of the foyer. It wasn't a playful slap. It was a blow delivered with the full force of her rage. Her ring, a large sapphire that belonged to my great-grandmother, caught my lower lip. My head snapped to the side. I tasted copper. Warm blood began to pool in my mouth. The room went dead silent. I stood there, stunned. I was 19. I was an adult. I had not been hit since I was a toddler falling on the playground. The shock was more paralyzed than the pain. I touched my lip, and my fingers came away red. I looked at Victoria. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She didn't look sorry. She looked exhilaratingly angry. I looked past her, toward the Christmas tree. In the scuffle, I had knocked over the small brown box Leonard had sent. It had tumbled across the floor and landed near my feet. The fall had loosened the red string. The tag had flipped over. My vision was swimming, tears of pain blurring the edges of the room, but the writing on the tag was crystal clear. It was Leonard's handwriting. The ink was dark and steady. To Melissa, from the one who chose you when no one else did. The words hit me harder than the slap. From the one who chose you. It was the truth. The absolute, undeniable truth laid bare on a piece of cardstock. It was an indictment of everyone standing in that room. Victoria followed my gaze. She saw the tag. She read it. I saw the realization dawn on her face. She knew what that sentence meant. She knew that if I opened that box, whatever was inside would solidify that truth. It would confirm that Leonard was my true father in every way that mattered, and it would expose her and Daniel for the hollow shells they were. "No!" she shrieked. She scrambled forward, dropping to her knees. She wasn't elegant now. She was desperate. She snatched the box from the floor. "Give that back," I said, my voice thick with blood. "You do not get this," she screamed. Her voice was unrecognizable. "He doesn't get to do this. He doesn't get to judge us." She ripped the tag off the box. I watched the cardstock tear. The sound was like a bone breaking. She crumpled the tag in her fist and threw it into the fireplace. Then she clutched the box to her chest like a shield. "This house doesn't need his charity," she yelled, "and neither do you. Get out! Get out!" She turned and ran toward the stairs, clutching the box. I took a step to follow her, adrenaline flooding my system. I was going to fight her. I was going to tackle her on the stairs if I had to. That box was mine. "Melissa." The voice stopped me cold. It wasn't Victoria. It was Daniel. My father was standing at the foot of the stairs. He blocked my path. He looked at my bleeding lip. He looked at the tears standing in my eyes. He looked at his wife running away with my property. He had a choice. In that second, he had the final choice of his life as a parent. He could step aside. He could demand his wife return what she stole. He could hand me a towel for my face. He took a sip of his scotch. "Don't cause trouble tonight, Melissa," he said. His voice was tired, devoid of any emotion. "Just go. It is better this way." The world stopped. The physical pain in my lip vanished, replaced by a cold, numbing sensation that spread from my chest to my fingertips. That was it. That was the end. He didn't care that she hit me. He didn't care that she stole from me. He only cared about the noise. He only cared about maintaining the fragile peace of his miserable life. I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, I didn't see a father. I saw a weak man standing in a big house that he paid for with his soul. "Okay," I whispered, "okay." I turned around. Ruth was standing by the door, her face pale, her hands trembling violently. She looked ready to collapse. "Come on, Grandma," I said. I put my arm around her, guiding her out. I didn't look back. We walked out into the cold night air. The snow was falling softly, covering the perfectly manicured lawn. The silence of the car was heavy. I touched my lip again. The bleeding had slowed, but the swelling was starting. I could smell the pine from the wreath on the door, mixed with the metallic tang of my own blood. As we drove away from Stonehaven Hills, I didn't cry. I stared out the window at the passing lights. In my mind, I saw the tag, from the one who chose you when no one else did. And I thought about the box. Victoria had taken it. She had run upstairs and locked herself in her room with it. She thought she had won. She thought that by taking the object, she had taken the power. But she was wrong. She hadn't just stolen a gift. She had stolen a secret. Leonard Whitlow was a judge. He never did anything without a reason. He wouldn't have sent a box with that specific message unless the contents were vital. What was in there? A letter? A check? A deed? My lip throbbed in time with my heartbeat. "Keep it," I thought, staring into the darkness. "Keep the box. Victoria, because you just gave me something much more dangerous." She had given me a reason, and she had given me a target. I was 19 years old, and I had just learned that justice wasn't something you were given, It was something you had to take. The girl who wanted a family died in that foyer. The woman who would eventually destroy them was born the moment the door clicked shut behind me. The winter that followed that Christmas Eve was the longest of my life. It was a season defined not by the weather, but by the slow, agonizing erosion of the only safety I had ever known. February brought the silence. My grandmother, Ruth, the woman who had taught me that love was something you knead into dough and knit into sweaters, suffered a massive stroke while gardening. It was sudden, it was violent, and it was final. She never woke up. I stood by her grave in the frozen ground of the Willow Creek Cemetery, holding an umbrella over my grandfather's head. Leonard stood like a statue carved from gray stone. He did not cry. Judges do not cry in public, but I could feel the tremors running through his arm where it pressed against mine. He was vibrating with a grief so profound it threatened to shatter his bones. Daniel and Victoria did not come. They sent a flower arrangement. It was a grotesque display of lilies that was far too large and far too expensive, with a ribbon that read, "Deepest Sympathies." It looked like something you would send to a business partner, not the woman who raised your child. I took the card, tore it into quarters, and dropped it into the mud before the casket was lowered. With Ruth gone, the buffer between me and the world was removed. I was 20 years old, a second-year law student, and I suddenly felt like an orphan. But I did not have time to mourn. I had a job to do. I moved out of my dorm and back into the house in Willow Creek. I told myself it was temporary, just until Leonard got back on his feet. But as the weeks turned into months, I realized I was not leaving. My grandfather was fading. The sharp, brilliant mind that had presided over hundreds of cases was clouding over with sorrow. I became the caregiver. I attended classes in the morning, drove home, cooked dinner, and spent my evenings studying torts and contracts at the kitchen table, while Leonard sat in his study down the hall. The house was filled with the sound of paper. Leonard was obsessed with organizing. It was a frantic, almost desperate need to catalog his life. He spent hours shredding old documents, filing others, and writing notes in the margins of legal pads. He was preparing for the end, even if he wouldn't admit it to me. There was one box, a heavy steel file box, that he kept under his desk. Whenever I entered the room, he would slide it out of sight with his foot. "It is just boring administrative work, Melissa," he would say, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Do not worry about it. Focus on your exams. You are going to be a better lawyer than I ever was." But sometimes, late at night, when the whiskey had loosened the tight knot in his chest, he would talk. He would talk about the past. He would talk about the law. And inevitably, he would talk about that Christmas Eve. "I should have been there," he said one night. The rain was hammering against the window pane. He was staring into the bottom of his glass. "I made you go into the lion's den alone. I thought the gift would be enough. I thought the message would protect you." "It is okay." "Grandpa," I said, looking up from my casebook, "it is over." He shook his head slowly. "No, it is not over. You did not get the whole gift. Melissa, you only saw the tag. You did not see what was inside. That box. It was the key. It was the start of the conversation." "What conversation?" I asked. He looked at me then, and for a moment, the fog cleared. His eyes were sharp, piercing, the eyes of the Honorable Leonard Whitlow. "The conversation about who they really are," he said, "and what I have done to protect you from them." He opened his mouth to say more, but then he winced, a spasm of pain crossing his face. The moment passed. He waved his hand dismissively. "Later. We will talk about it when the paperwork is done, when I have secured everything." That later never came. 13 months after Ruth died. I came home from a late lecture on property law to find the house too quiet. The television wasn't on. The kettle wasn't whistling. I found him in his study. He was slumped over his desk, his cheek resting on a stack of legal pads. He looked peaceful. He looked like he was just taking a nap between cases, but the pen had slipped from his fingers, and the skin of his hand was cold. On the desk, right next to his head, was a single sheet of yellow legal paper. It wasn't a suicide note. It was an instruction manual. It read, "Last will and testament draft. Final review. Contact Noah Mercer." And below that, circled 3 times in red ink, Christmas box, bank key, talk with Melissa. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence, reading those 7 words over and over again, Christmas box, bank key. The grief that hit me then was different from when Ruth died. It wasn't a sharp stab. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. I was truly alone now. The 2 people who had chosen me were gone, but as I dialed 911 and then Noah Mercer, a cold, crystalline clarity took over my mind. Leonard had died working. He had died leaving me clues. I could not collapse. I had to investigate. The funeral was small. Leonard had outlived most of his contemporaries. Noah Mercer stood by my side, his face grim. Again, my father and stepmother were absent. This time, they didn't even send flowers. They sent an email. It arrived 2 days after the obituary was published. It was addressed to me, but the tone was so formal it could have been written by a robot. "Melissa, we were saddened to hear of your grandfather's passing. Unfortunately, due to a critical business merger in Europe, we cannot attend the service. We trust you will handle the arrangements appropriately. We will be in touch regarding the estate settlement. Daniel and Victoria." Estate settlement. They didn't say inheritance. They said settlement. As if it were a business transaction they were eager to close. The reading of the will took place in Noah's office a week later. It was a formality. I knew what it said. Leonard had left everything to me, the house, the savings, the small stock portfolio, and he had appointed me as the executor of the Ruth Whitlow Scholarship Fund. "It is straightforward," Noah said, sliding the document across the desk. "You are the sole beneficiary, but Melissa, you know this isn't going to be simple. They will contest it. They have been waiting for this moment for 20 years. "I know." I said, "Let them come." I went back to the house, my house now, and walked into Leonard's study. It felt like walking into a crime scene. I sat in his chair. It still smelled like his tobacco and old paper. I opened the center drawer of his desk. Inside, tucked way in the back, was a small, polished, wooden box. It wasn't the Christmas box. This was different. I opened it. Inside were 6 black moleskin notebooks. They were numbered by year, going back 2 decades. I took out the first one. I opened it. It was a ledger, but it wasn't a ledger of household expenses. It was a ledger of extortion. January 4th, 1998. $5,000 to Daniel. Reason: credit card debt. March 10th, 1998. $8,000 to Victoria. Reason: investment opportunity. July 15th, 1998. $3,000 to Daniel. Reason: mortgage arrears. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. I picked up the next notebook, and the next. The numbers grew. As the years passed, the amounts increased. $12,000 for a car, $20,000 for a bridge loan, $6,000 for a vacation. I grabbed a calculator and a notepad. I started adding. I sat there for 4 hours, processing 20 years of data. When I finally hit the total button, I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. The number was staggering. Over the course of my life, my father and stepmother had taken nearly $750,000 from my grandfather. I leaned back in the chair, feeling physically ill. All those years they claimed they were struggling. All those years Daniel told me he couldn't afford to buy me a prom dress, or help with my first car, or pay for my textbooks. He would look at me with those sad, puppy dog eyes and say, "We are just tight right now. Honey, the market is tough." They weren't tight. They were being subsidized. They were living in a mansion in Stonehaven Hills, driving luxury cars, and wearing designer clothes. And it was all funded by the man they called an old parasite. Leonard hadn't just paid for my tuition. He had paid for their entire lifestyle. And he had recorded every single cent. I looked at the note Leonard had left on his desk again. Christmas box, bank key, talk with Melissa. My mind began to race, connecting the dots with the precision of the lawyer I was becoming. Leonard kept meticulous records. These notebooks proved the payments, but the notebooks were just a log. They weren't the source. Bank key. Leonard had a safety deposit box. He must have. A place where he kept the actual documents, the canceled checks, the loan agreements, maybe even threatening letters or emails from Victoria demanding money. And the note linked the bank key to the Christmas box. I closed my eyes, and I was back in that foyer. I saw the brown box sliding across the floor. I saw the tag fluttering into the fire. I saw Victoria clutching the box to her chest as she ran up the stairs. "You did not get the whole gift," Leonard had said. He had put the key in that box. I was certain of it. He wanted me to open that gift on Christmas Eve, find the key, and ask him what it was for. He wanted to sit me down and explain everything. He wanted to give me the access to his safety deposit box so I would know the truth about my father before he died. But Victoria had stolen it. She had stolen the box because she was petty and cruel. She thought she was taking a sentimental trinket. She had no idea she had stolen the key to a vault that contained the evidence of her own greed. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark driveway where my father's car used to park during those short, performative visits. A cold smile touched my lips. Victoria had the box. She probably still had it, thrown in the back of a closet somewhere, unopened, a trophy of her victory over me. Or maybe she had opened it, found a random key she didn't recognize, and tossed it in a drawer. She had the weapon that could destroy her. She just didn't know it was a weapon. And now, they were coming for the estate. They were coming to claim that Leonard was senile, that I manipulated him. They were going to drag his name through the mud to get the last few dollars he had left. They had no idea that the manipulated old man had set a trap for them from beyond the grave. I picked up the phone and dialed Noah's number again. It was midnight, but I knew he would answer. "Noah," I said when he picked up, my voice steady and hard. "Don't file the standard probate papers yet. We need to prepare for a fight. I found the ledgers, and I know where the missing key is." "Where?" Noah asked, his voice thick with sleep. "The plaintiff has it," I said. "She stole it 10 years ago, and she is going to bring it into court for me, even if she doesn't know she is doing it." The investigation was over. The war had just begun. The war for Leonard Whitlow's legacy did not begin with a gavel banging in a courtroom. It began with a thin, white envelope sliding across my desk on a Tuesday morning. I was at the Briarstone County Bureau of Justice, reviewing witness statements for a money laundering case. The office hummed with the low, steady energy of law enforcement. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, the smell of burnt coffee. My supervisor, a gruff man named Chief Miller, who had been a detective for 30 years, dropped the envelope on top of my file. "This came for you," he said, "from the State Bar Association, Ethics Division." He didn't make eye contact. That was the first warning sign. I opened it. The letter was formal, printed on heavy bond paper, notifying me that an anonymous complaint had been filed against me. The allegation was specific and ugly. It claimed that I, Melissa Robbins, had utilized my specialized legal training and position as a court investigator to exert undue influence over a vulnerable, elderly relative, effectively isolating him to manipulate his estate planning. I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't just coming for the money. They were coming for my license. They were coming for my career. I knew immediately who Anonymous was. Before I could even process the complaint, the second wave hit. 2 days later, the Harborview Chronicle, the local paper that everyone in town read over breakfast, ran a Sunday feature. It wasn't buried in the back pages. It was front and center in the Metro section. The headline was a masterpiece of yellow journalism, "Legacy Lost: How a Local Legal Hero Was Isolated by His Own Kin." Above the fold was a large, high-resolution photograph of Victoria. She was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, looking downcast and tragically beautiful. Next to her, Daniel had his hand on her shoulder, looking stoic and pained. I sat in my kitchen, The paper spread out on the table where Leonard used to drink his tea, and read the lies they had spun. "We loved him so much," Victoria was quoted as saying, "but we are busy people. We run a business. We were building a future for the whole family. We didn't realize that while we were working, Melissa was poisoning him against us. She wouldn't let us talk to him. She intercepted calls. She preyed on a confused old man. It was a brilliant inversion of reality. Every time they had ignored Leonard, they claimed I had blocked them. Every time they had been too busy to visit, they claimed I had locked the door." Daniel had a quote too. My father, who had stood on the stairs and told me to leave quietly while I bled, was now playing the victim. "Melissa has always been difficult." The article quoted him. "She was a cold child, distant. She never gave Victoria a chance. We tried so hard to include her, but she pushed us away. I think she saw my father as a way to punish us. It is heartbreaking to see her use a dying man as a weapon." I crushed the paper in my fist. The audacity was breathtaking. They were using the very abandonment they had inflicted on me as proof of my coldness. Then came the legal sledgehammer. Noah Mercer called me on a Friday afternoon. His voice was tight. "They have filed," he said, "and they hired Colton Price." My stomach dropped. Colton Price was not a lawyer you hired to find the truth. He was a lawyer you hired to scorch the earth. He was known in legal circles as the butcher of probate. "What is the motion?" I asked, staring out the window at the gray sky. "They are petitioning to invalidate the will and the codicil based on lack of testamentary capacity and undue influence," Noah said. "But Melissa, it is worse than that. They have attached an exhibit to their filing." "What exhibit?" "A psychological evaluation." "I never sat for an evaluation," I said, confused. "They hired an expert witness," Noah explained, "a Dr. Aris Thorne. He reviewed your employment records, your college transcripts, and witness testimony provided by your father. He has constructed a profile. He claims you suffer from, and I'm quoting here, a pathological fear of abandonment. He argues that your childhood trauma caused you to develop a controlling fixation on Leonard Whitlow to replace the parental figures you felt you lost." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. They were weaponizing my pain. They were taking the very real, very deep wound they had caused, the empty chairs at the recitals, the missed birthdays, the coldness, and using it to paint me as a predator. They were saying I didn't love Leonard. I was just hoarding him to fill a void. It was the cruelest thing anyone had ever done to me. But the final blow, the one that almost broke me, happened inside the one place I felt safe. A week later, I was called into Chief Miller's office. The door was closed. The blinds were drawn. "Sit down." "Robbins," Miller said. He looked uncomfortable. He shifted a pen back and forth on his desk. "We had a visitor this morning," he said. "Your father." My spine stiffened. Daniel was here. He came to speak to me personally. Miller said he was very concerned. He wanted to make sure we were supporting you. He told me that you have been under a lot of strain since Leonard died. He insinuated that perhaps your grief was clouding your judgment. He mentioned that you might be having trouble distinguishing between your personal vendettas and your professional duties. Miller paused, looking at me searching. He suggested you might need a leave of absence for your mental health. I sat there, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Daniel hadn't come to check on me. He had come to sabotage me. He knew that in my line of work, reputation was everything. If I was seen as unstable, if I was seen as someone who used the law for personal revenge, I was finished. He was threatening my livelihood to force me to settle. "Chief," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage, "my father is a plaintiff in a lawsuit against me worth millions of dollars. He is trying to discredit me." Miller nodded slowly. "I figured as much. You are a good investigator, Melissa. But this is messy, and the Bureau doesn't like messy. You need to fix this, fast." I walked out of the Bureau into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. I felt cornered. I felt small. For the first time since this started, I wavered. I sat in my car, my forehead resting against the steering wheel. I was tired. I was 29 years old, and I was fighting a war on 3 fronts: legal, media, and professional. I could end it. I could call Noah right now. I could tell him to offer a settlement, give them half, give them $2 million. They would go away. Victoria would get her money. Daniel would get his piece. The articles would stop. The complaints would be withdrawn. I could keep the house. I could keep my job. I could go back to being anonymous. It was the logical choice. It was the safe choice. I reached for my phone. I unlocked it and pulled up Noah's contact. My thumb hovered over the call button. Just give them what they want, a voice in my head whispered. You can't win against lies this big. But then, the smell of pine hit me. It was a phantom scent, a memory triggered by the stress. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I wasn't in the parking lot. I was in the foyer of the house in Stonehaven Hills. I felt the sting of the slap. I felt the hot metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I saw Daniel standing on the stairs, holding his scotch, looking at me with those empty, cowardly eyes. Don't make a scene, Melissa. And I saw Victoria. I saw her claws ripping the tag. From the one who chose you. She hadn't just stolen a box that night. She had stolen the last moment I was supposed to have with my grandfather. She had stolen the truth. And now, Daniel had walked into my workplace, into the sanctuary I had built for myself, and tried to steal my dignity. He had tried to paint me as the crazy, broken daughter to cover up the fact that he was a negligent, greedy father. If I settled, I was agreeing with them. If I gave them a single dollar, I was admitting that their version of the story had merit. I was admitting that Leonard was senile. I was admitting that I was a manipulator. I lowered the phone. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were hard. They were Leonard's eyes. Family is who chooses you, he had said. And he had chosen me to fight this battle. He had left me the ledgers. He had left me the clue about the key. He didn't leave those things for me to use as leverage for a plea deal. He left them for me to use as ammunition. I wasn't going to settle. I wasn't going to hide. I started the car engine. The roar of the motor felt like a battle cry. I drove straight to Noah's office. I didn't call. I just showed up. He was surprised to see me. He had a stack of files on his desk. The motion from Colton Price. Melissa, he said, standing up, I was just going to call you. Price sent over a settlement offer. It is insulting, but it would end the litigation. They want 70% of the liquid assets, and they will let you keep the house. I walked over to his desk. I picked up the settlement offer. It was a thick document, full of legal jargon that boiled down to give us the money and we will stop destroying your life. I looked at it. Then I looked at Noah. No, I said. Noah blinked. Melissa, look at the PR. Look at the ethics complaint. If we go to trial, they are going to drag you through the mud. They are going to put your entire life on display. It is going to be ugly. I know, I said, but they are making a mistake. Noah. What mistake? They think they are dragging me into the light, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. But they are actually dragging themselves into the light. They think this is a will contest. They think it is about checking account balances and medical records. I slammed the settlement offer down on the desk. I want to file a countersuit. I said, I want to file for a full forensic accounting of the last 20 years of Leonard's finances. I want to subpoena Daniel's business records. I want to depose Victoria under oath. Noah looked at me. A slow smile began to spread across his face. He saw it. He saw the shift. The victim was gone. The investigator was here. You want to put them on trial, he said. Yes, I replied. I want to accept the role of defendant. Let them bring their cameras. Let them bring their shark lawyer. Let them tell their story to the world. I touched the scar on my lip. Because when they are done talking, I said, I am going to show the world exactly what kind of people beat a 19-year-old girl on Christmas Eve and steal a gift from a dying man. We are not settling. Noah, we are going to war. Noah picked up his pen. Okay, he said, let's get to work. I walked out of his office and into the evening air. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. I took a deep breath. Let them attack my career. Let them lie in the papers. They had no idea what I had in the wooden box in my desk. And they certainly had no idea that their greed was about to lead them directly into the trap Leonard Whitlow had set from the grave. The decision to fight was emotional, but the war itself had to be cold, calculated, and aggressively logical. I was done reacting to their narrative. It was time to build my own, brick by undeniable brick. I started with the money. I took the notebooks I had found in Leonard's desk, the ones documenting 20 years of loans to my father, and I brought them to the one person who could make them sing, Lila Graves. Lila was a forensic accountant at the Briarstone County Bureau of Justice, a woman who saw the world in spreadsheets and could spot a fraudulent wire transfer from a mile away. We met in a small, soundproof conference room at the Bureau after hours. I laid the notebooks out next to the official bank statements I had obtained as the executor of the estate. Lila spent 2 hours in silence, her eyes darting between the handwritten ledgers and the bank printouts, her fingers flying across a calculator. Finally, she sat back and took off her glasses. "You know," she said, her voice dry, "usually when I look at elder financial abuse cases, it is messy. It is $50 here, $100 there, stolen checks, missing cash." She tapped a red fingernail on the spreadsheet she had just created. "This is not messy, Melissa. This is systemic." "Show me," I said. Lila spun her laptop around. She had created a graph. One line showed the dates of the transfers from Leonard to Daniel. The other line, which she had cross-referenced with public business filings and bankruptcy records for Daniel's various shell companies, showed my father's business history. "Look at the correlation," Lila said, tracing the lines. "Here, in 2004, Daniel files for restructuring on his real estate firm. 3 days later, a check for $40,000 clears from Leonard's account. Here, in 2008, the market crashes. Daniel's portfolio takes a hit. 2 weeks later, Leonard liquidates a bond and transfers $65,000 to Victoria." I stared at the screen. The pattern was undeniable. It wasn't a family helping out in a crisis. It was a parasite feeding on a host. Every time Daniel failed, which was often, he didn't downsize or adjust his lifestyle. He simply extracted the difference from my grandfather. "It gets worse," Lila added. "Look at the memo lines Leonard wrote. Medical emergency, tax error, legal fees. But when I cross-referenced these dates, there were no liens filed. There were no hospitalizations. They were lying to him to get the cash. Melissa, this isn't just ungratefulness. This is fraud." "Can we prove they lied?" I asked. "The numbers don't lie," Lila said firmly. "I can testify to this pattern. I can show a jury that Leonard Whitlow wasn't supporting his family. He was being bled dry by them." I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. "Print it," I said. "Print everything." My next stop was Dr. Howard Ellison. The cornerstone of Colton Price's lawsuit was the claim that Leonard lacked testamentary capacity, that he was too senile to understand what he was signing when he left everything to me. They were painting him as a confused old man who didn't know his own mind. Dr. Ellison practiced out of a brownstone in the older part of the city. He had been Leonard's physician for 30 years. He was a man of few words, with hands that looked like they had weathered 1,000 storms. When I explained the lawsuit, his expression darkened. "Dementia?" he repeated, the word tasting sour in his mouth. "Leonard Whitlow was the sharpest man I have ever known, right up until his heart stopped." He pulled a thick file from his cabinet. "I conducted a mini mental state examination on your grandfather every 6 months for the last 5 years. It is standard protocol for patients over 80. Do you know what his average score was?" I shook my head. 30 out of 30, Dr. Ellison said, slamming the file onto the desk. He could recite the date, the president, and count backward from 100 by sevens faster than I could, 6 weeks before he died. We discussed the ethical implications of a recent Supreme Court ruling during his checkup. Does that sound like a man who didn't know who he was leaving his money to? Will you say that in court? I asked. Melissa, he said, looking me in the eye. I would walk through fire to say that in court. To suggest Leonard was incompetent is an insult to his dignity. I won't let them do that to him. I had the financial motive, I had the medical capacity. Now I needed to dismantle the emotional narrative, the lie that Victoria and Daniel were the loving family, and I was the cold outsider. For that, I needed Marta Ruiz. Marta had been my grandparents' housekeeper for 15 years. She was the one who dusted the photos of me on the mantel. She was the one who made tea for Victoria when she deigned to visit. Marta had retired after Ruth died, moving to a small apartment on the south side of town. When I knocked on her door, she hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. We drank coffee in her small kitchen, and I told her about the article in the Harborview Chronicle. Marta didn't get angry. She got busy. She went to a closet and pulled out a stack of spiral-bound calendars. I kept these for tax purposes, she said, to track my hours, but I also wrote down who was in the house, so I knew how much food to prepare. She opened the calendar from 3 years ago. Look, she said. The pages were blank of names, week after week, month after month. They say they were there all the time? Marta scoffed. Victoria came twice that year, once for Easter, stayed 45 minutes, once in August to pick up a piece of furniture she wanted. Daniel came maybe 3 times, alone. She flipped to December. And you? She pointed to the entries. Melissa, dinner, Melissa, groceries, Melissa, doctor appointment. My name was on almost every page. But I have something else, Marta said, her voice lowering. She hesitated, then walked to a drawer and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Leonard gave me this a few months before he died. He asked me to keep it safe. He said, Marta, if anything happens, and if Victoria starts making noise, give this to Melissa. I unfolded the paper. It was a printout of an email Leonard had drafted but perhaps never sent. Or maybe he sent it to himself just to have a timestamp. It was dated 2 years ago. Subject, the box and the will. To the file. I had a nightmare again about Christmas Eve. The look on Melissa's face. I fear that when I am gone, Victoria will not be satisfied with what she has already taken. She took the box that night. She thinks it is just a gift she stole. She does not know what that box represents. If they attack my will, if they try to rewrite history, I pray Melissa finds the key. I pray she understands that I did not leave her out in the cold. I only hope the box has not been destroyed. I stared at the words. She took the box that night. It was proof. It was written confirmation from the deceased that the box existed, that it was stolen, and that it was vital. He knew, I whispered. He knew they would do this. He knew them better than they knew themselves, Marta said softly. I took the email to Noah Mercer the next morning. My lawyer read it twice. Then he looked up at me with a gleam in his eye that terrified me a little. This is it, Noah said. This is the pivot point. We use it to prove she is a thief? I asked. No, Noah said. We use it to get a subpoena. He stood up and began pacing his office. We don't sue for the money yet. We sue for discovery. We petition the court to allow us to open Leonard's safety deposit box immediately, regardless of the will contest, because there is reason to believe it contains time-sensitive instructions. But we don't have the key, I said. Leonard's note said Christmas box, bank key. The key was in the gift Victoria stole. Exactly, Noah said. So we petition the court to compel Victoria Hale to produce the stolen property referenced in the decedent's email. We force her to either produce the box and the key inside, or admit she destroyed evidence. It was a trap, a brilliant, legal trap. If she produced the box, I got the key. If she claimed she didn't have it, she looked like a liar in the face of Leonard's email. If she admitted she destroyed it, she was guilty of spoliation of evidence. There is one more person I need to see, I said. Before we pull the trigger on this, I drove out to the nursing home where Judge Emeritus Franklin Cole lived. He was 90 years old, frail as a bird. but his mind was still a steel trap. He had been Leonard's mentor, then his peer, then his best friend. He sat in a wheelchair by the window, a blanket over his knees. When I told him about the lawsuit, he let out a laugh that sounded like dry leaves rustling. "Colton Price?" Judge Cole wheezed. "That ambulance chaser. Leonard used to eat men like him for breakfast." "They are saying Leonard was manipulated." "Judge Cole," I said. "They are saying I isolated him." The old judge turned to look at me. His eyes were milky with cataracts, but his gaze was direct. "Melissa," he said, "Leonard came to me about 5 years ago. He was drafting the codicil to his will. He sat right where you are sitting. Do you know what he told me?" "No," I said. "He said, 'Frank, I have 2 children who are waiting for me to die, and 1 granddaughter who is helping me live. I am not leaving my money to Melissa because she is blood. I am leaving it to her because she is the only one who stayed when the party was over.'" Judge Cole reached out and patted my hand. "He told me about the Christmas box, too. He told me he put a key in there. He said it was a test. He said, 'If Victoria steals the gift, she steals her own inheritance. If she lets Melissa open it, they might get a second chance.'" "She stole it," I said. "Then she sealed her fate," Judge Cole said. "You go get them, kid. You bring the hammer down." That night, I sat in Leonard's kitchen with Noah. We had the strategy, we had the evidence, we had the witnesses. The table was covered in papers. Lila's graphs, Dr. Ellison's medical reports, Marta's logs, and the copy of the email. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Noah was nursing a mug of coffee, looking at the layout of the case. "Melissa," he said quietly. "Yeah?" "We are going to win this," he said. "With what you have gathered, we are going to destroy them. The forensic accounting alone will humiliate Daniel. The email will ruin Victoria's credibility. We are going to strip them bare in open court." "Good," I said, staring at the steam rising from my cup. "But I have to ask you something," Noah said. He leaned forward. "If we force her to produce the box, or if we find a way into that safety deposit box, are you sure you want to know what is in there?" "What do you mean?" "Leonard said the key opens a bank box," Noah said. "But we don't know what is in the bank box. It could be money, it could be bonds, but knowing Leonard, it is probably the truth. The unvarnished, ugly truth about your family. Maybe things you don't know. Maybe things that will hurt you too." He paused. "Is this about the money, Melissa? Or is it about the revenge? Because if it is just revenge, the cost might be higher than you think." I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the stove where Ruth used to bake pies. I looked at the chair where Leonard used to read his paper. I looked at the empty space where I used to sit, hoping my father would walk through the door. I thought about the slap. I thought about the blood on my lip. I thought about the way Victoria laughed when she tore the tag. "It is not about the money," I said. "I don't care about the millions. They can burn it." I looked Noah in the eye. "They stole the last conversation I was supposed to have with him," I said. "They stole his voice. Whatever is in that safety deposit box, it is the last thing he wanted to say to me. It is the end of the sentence he started on that gift tag." I clenched my hand into a fist on the table. "I don't care if the truth hurts. Noah, I have been hurting for 20 years. I want to look Victoria in the eye and read whatever Leonard wrote. I want her to hear it. I want them to know that he saw them. He really saw them." Noah nodded slowly. He understood. "Okay," he said. "Then we file the subpoena tomorrow morning. We are going hunting for the Christmas box." "Let's hope she kept it," I said. "If she didn't," Noah replied, "God help her, because destroying it will look even worse than stealing it." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark silhouette of the oak tree in the yard. I was ready. I had my army. I had my weapons. And somewhere, in a safety deposit box, I didn't have the key to yet. Leonard was waiting to testify. The first day of the trial felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a public evisceration. I sat at the defense table. my hands clasped so tightly that my knuckles turned the color of old bone, watching Colton Price turn the tragedy of my life into a 3-act play for the benefit of the gallery. He did not start with statutes or precedents. He started with a story. Price walked to the center of the courtroom, buttoning his jacket with the slow, deliberate movements of a man who knew he controlled the room. He looked at the jury box, then at Judge Brooks, and finally, he let his gaze rest on me with a look of profound pity that made my skin crawl. "We are here to talk about love," Price said, his voice a rich baritone that carried to the back of the room. "And we are here to talk about the dark shadow that mimics love, control." He paced back and forth. "You are going to hear about a lonely old man, Leonard Whitlow, a man who missed his family, and you are going to hear about a granddaughter, Melissa Robbins, who saw that loneliness not as a tragedy to be healed, but as an opportunity to be exploited." He paused for effect. "The defense will tell you she was a devoted caregiver, but we will show you she was a gatekeeper. We will show you a young woman, embittered by a teenage argument, who ran away from home and returned years later with a plan to wall off her grandfather, to poison his mind against his own daughter and son-in-law, and to ensure that when he passed, she was the only one holding the pen." I kept my face impassive. I had trained for this. I was a legal investigator. I knew how to wear the mask, but under the table, my leg was trembling. "You will see the documents," Price continued. "You will see the emails where she forbade him from helping his own son-in-law. You will see the psychological profile of a woman driven by a pathological need to possess the people she claims to love. And by the end of this trial, you will see that this is not a will, it is a ransom note." He sat down. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Noah leaned over to me. "Breathe," he whispered. "It is just a story. We have the facts." But facts felt very far away when Victoria took the stand. She was a vision of maternal grief. She wore a soft blue cardigan that made her look fragile, a stark contrast to the sharp, diamond-hard woman who had slapped me 10 years ago. When Price asked her about her relationship with Leonard, she produced a handkerchief and dabbed at perfectly dry eyes. "I loved my father," she said, her voice trembling. "We were very close. Daniel and I. We were building a business. Yes, so we could not be there every day, but we called. We tried to visit, but every time we did, Melissa was there." "There in what way?" Price asked gently. "Hovering," Victoria said. "Monitoring. If I called to ask Dad for help with a business loan, Melissa would snatch the phone. She would scream at me. She told Dad that we were just using him. She made him paranoid. She made him think his own daughter was a thief." "Let us talk about Christmas Eve, 10 years ago," Price said. "The defense claims there was an altercation." Victoria took a deep, shuddering breath. "It was the worst night of my life. Melissa came to our house. She was not herself. She was screaming about money. She was screaming that we did not deserve Dad's help. She started throwing things. She knocked over the Christmas tree." I stared at her, my mouth going dry. The lie was so bold, so detailed. "Did you hit her?" Price asked. I raised my hand to stop her. Victoria sobbed. "She was coming at me. I was terrified. It was self-defense. And then she ran out. She stole a box from under the tree, a gift Dad had sent for me, and she ran out into the night. We didn't see her again for years." "She stole a gift intended for you?" "Yes," Victoria whispered, "and she never gave it back." I felt a wave of nausea. She had taken the truth, that she hit me and stole my gift, and inverted it completely. She had turned me into the aggressor and herself into the victim of theft. Noah wrote something on his legal pad. "She is good, but she is overplaying it." Then came Daniel. My father walked to the stand with his head down. He looked older, more tired than he had in the hallway. He sat heavily in the witness chair, refusing to look in my direction. "Mr. Hale," Price said, "you heard your wife's testimony. Is that how you remember Christmas Eve?" Daniel rubbed his face with his hands. "It is all a blur," he said, his voice raspy. "There was so much yelling. Melissa. She has always had a temper. Since she was a little girl, if she felt ignored, she would lash out. That night, she was out of control. I tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't listen. She just wanted to hurt Victoria. Did you see your wife hit her? I saw Victoria push her away, Daniel said. To keep her back. Melissa. She tripped. She hit the table. That is how she cut her lip. It was an accident, but she spun it. She told everyone we beat her. He looked up then, and his eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. There was no apology in them, just a dull, cowardly survival instinct. He was throwing his daughter to the wolves to save his lifestyle. She is my daughter, Daniel added, his voice cracking, and I love her, but she needs help. She has needed help for a long time. She used my father to hurt us. The gallery murmured. I could feel the eyes of the strangers boring into the back of my neck. To them, I wasn't the victim. I was the unstable, vindictive daughter who had manipulated a senile old man. Then Price played his trump card. Your Honor, Price said, we would like to submit Exhibit C, a psychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Eris Thorne. Noah stood up immediately. Objection. Ms. Robbins has never been examined by Dr. Thorne. Dr. Thorne is an expert in forensic psychology, Price countered smoothly. He has reviewed Ms. Robbins' employment records, her academic transcripts, and the sworn affidavits of her parents. His findings are relevant to her state of mind during the time the will was drafted. Judge Brooks adjusted her glasses. I will allow it, but the weight given to a profile constructed without a personal interview will be limited. Proceed. Price read from the report. It was a massacre of my character masked as medical science. Subject exhibits classic signs of pathological abandonment compensation, Price read. Individuals with this profile often seek to control elderly authority figures to replace the parental bond they feel they lacked. They create a dynamic of dependency, isolating the elder to ensure they remain the favorite. This behavior is often accompanied by financial control, as money becomes a proxy for love. Every word was a twisted mirror of my pain. They were taking the trauma they had inflicted on me, the abandonment, the empty chairs, the loneliness, and using it to diagnose me as a predator. It was the ultimate gaslighting. By the time the lunch recess was called, I felt hollowed out, but the afternoon session was worse. The plaintiff calls Mrs. Agatha Higgins, the clerk announced. I frowned. I recognized the name. She was a neighbor who lived 2 houses down from Leonard in Willow Creek. She was a sweet, confused woman who used to bake cookies for the neighborhood kids. Mrs. Higgins tottered to the stand, clutching her purse. Mrs. Higgins, Price said kindly, did you ever hear arguments coming from the Whitlow house? Oh, yes, she said, nodding vigorously. The walls are thin, you know, and in the summer, with the windows open. What did you hear? I heard Melissa yelling, she said. She was yelling at poor Mr. Leonard. She was shouting about money. She kept saying, "Stop sending it. You cannot send them anymore. It is too much." She sounded angry. Furious, Mrs. Higgins said. She sounded very controlling. Poor Leonard. He just wanted peace. It was a nightmare. I had shouted those things. I had shouted them because I was trying to stop him from being bled dry. But without the context, without the knowledge that them referred to the parasites sitting at the plaintiff's table. It sounded exactly like Price wanted it to sound. A greedy granddaughter berating an old man about his checkbook. Price smiled. He looked at the jury. He didn't need to say anything. The damage was done. Then came the emails. Price projected them onto the large screen. They were messages I had sent to Leonard during my second year of law school. Subject: Daniel's request. Grandpa, do not sign that check. If you send him another $5,000, you are enabling him. I am blocking the transfer from your online portal until we talk. Blocking the transfer, Price repeated, leaving the words hanging in the air. She admits it in her own writing. She was controlling his banking. She was deciding who he could and could not give his own money to. Noah cross-examined, trying to provide context, trying to explain that I was acting as a protector, But the narrative had set like concrete. The jury wasn't looking at me with curiosity anymore. They were looking at me with suspicion. Even Judge Brooks seemed wary. She peered over the rim of her glasses, asking a question that cut straight to the heart of my defense. "Ms. Robbins," she said, interrupting Noah's argument, "you are a legal professional. You understand the concept of fiduciary duty. Did you, at any point, secure a power of attorney that authorized you to block these transfers?" "No, Your Honor," I said, standing up. "It was informal. I was his granddaughter." "Informal control is still control," Judge Brooks said dryly. She made a note on her pad. "Let us proceed." When the gavel banged to end the day, I felt physically battered. I gathered my files with numb fingers. Across the aisle, Victoria was hugging Daniel. Price was patting them both on the back. They looked relieved. They looked like winners. I walked out of the courthouse side door to avoid the main press gaggle, but they were waiting. The sky had opened up, a cold, gray rain sleeting down onto the pavement. Flashes popped in my face, blinding me. "Melissa, did you hit your stepmother? Melissa, is it true you controlled the bank accounts? Do you have any comment on the psychological report?" I kept my head down, pushing through the crowd with Noah acting as a shield. I saw the newsstand on the corner. The evening edition of the Harborview Chronicle was already out. The photo on the front page was of Victoria, her head resting on Daniel's shoulder, looking devastated. The headline read, "Shattered Trust. Stepdaughter accused of elder abuse in high-profile will contest." I got into Noah's car and slammed the door, shutting out the noise and the rain. I was shaking. "We took a beating," Noah said quietly, starting the engine. "I am not going to lie to you. Melissa, today was bad. They are painting a picture that makes sense to people who don't know the truth." "They are winning," I whispered. "They are lying about everything, and they are winning." "It is only the first round," Noah said. "We haven't presented our case yet." "It doesn't matter," I said, staring out at the rain-streaked window. "Did you see the jury? They hate me. They think I am a monster." I felt the familiar sting of tears, the same helpless rage I had felt at 19, standing on the porch in the snow with a bleeding lip. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I couldn't beat them. They had money. They had a shark lawyer, and they had a seamless ability to lie without blinking. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to hear any more bad news. It buzzed again and again. I pulled it out, annoyed. It was Lila Graves. I hit answer. "Lila, I really cannot talk right now. It was a disaster." "Melissa, shut up and listen to me." Lila's voice came through the speaker, breathless and sharp. It wasn't her usual calm, analytical tone. She sounded like she had just run a marathon. "What is it?" I asked, a flicker of alertness cutting through my despair. "I have been on the phone with the legal department at SafeNest Systems for 6 hours, Lila said. "They kept giving me the runaround. They said the server archives from 10 years ago were corrupted. They said the account was closed." "I know, Lila. We tried." "No," she interrupted. "You tried. I harassed them. I threatened them with a subpoena for obstruction of justice. And guess what?" "What?" "They found a backup," Lila said. "A physical tape backup from the Stonehaven Hills server node. It was in a warehouse in New Jersey." My heart stopped. The rain pounding on the roof of the car seemed to fade away. "What is on it?" I whispered. "They just emailed me the digitized file," Lila said. "I am watching it right now. Melissa, I am looking at the foyer of the house. I see the Christmas tree." She paused, and I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Oh my God," Lila said softly. "Melissa, the camera angle. It is perfect. I can see the tag. I can see her hand. I can hear every single word she screamed at you." I gripped the phone so hard the screen threatened to crack. "Do you have it?" I asked. "Do you really have it?" "I have it," Lila said. "And Melissa? It is not just a video. It is an execution warrant. They are dead. They are absolutely dead." I lowered the phone. I looked at Noah. He was looking at me, his eyebrows raised in a silent question. I touched the scar on my lip. The shaking in my hands stopped. The coldness in my chest was replaced by a burning, white-hot heat. "Turn the car around," I said to Noah. "What?" "Turn the car around," I repeated. "We need to go to the office. Lila found the ghost." Noah's eyes widened. He didn't ask questions. He threw the car into gear and pulled a U-turn, tires screeching on the wet pavement. I looked back at the courthouse, fading into the rain. Victoria thought she had won the day. She thought she had buried the truth under a mountain of lies and fake tears. She was celebrating right now. "Enjoy your champagne, Victoria," I thought, "because tomorrow I'm going to play a movie." The rain hammered against the windows of the Briarstone County Bureau of Justice, turning the glass into a kaleidoscope of gray and black. It was midnight, but the fluorescent lights in the forensic accounting lab hummed with an intensity that matched the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Lila Graves sat in her ergonomic chair, her face illuminated by the blue glow of 3 monitors. Noah stood behind her, his arms crossed, his jaw set like granite. I pulled up a chair, my hands still shaking slightly from the drive over. "Tell me," I said, my voice tight. "Tell me exactly how this exists." Victoria swore there were no cameras inside the house. Lila spun her chair around, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. Victoria lied, or more likely, Victoria is technically illiterate. The house in Stonehaven Hills was equipped with a SafeNest system security package. It was top of the line 10 years ago. It didn't just record to a hard drive in the basement, it backed up motion-triggered events to a cloud server. "But that was a decade ago," Noah pointed out. "Surely the data would have been purged." "That is the beautiful part," Lila said, tapping her pen against the desk. "Daniel signed a 15-year contract to get a discount on the installation hardware. He is cheap. He locked himself into a long-term storage plan to save $500 on cameras. Even though he stopped paying the monthly monitoring fee 3 years ago, the contract holds. The data remains on the legacy server until the contract term expires, which is next year." She turned back to the screen. "He was too arrogant to cancel it. He thought no one would ever look." "Show me," I whispered. Lila clicked a file named Foyer Cam 1 Deck 24 2014 MP4. The screen flickered. Static washed over the image for a second, and then, there it was. The foyer of the Stonehaven Hills house. The massive Christmas tree stood in the corner, glittering with gold ornaments. The date and time stamp in the corner read December 24th, 11:42 p.m. I watched my 19-year-old self walk into the frame. I looked so young. My coat was cheap and ill-fitting. My posture was defensive. Victoria entered from the left, wearing that shimmering red gown. The audio was crisp. SafeNest didn't skimp on microphones. "I hope you enjoyed the free food," Victoria's voice cut through the room, tinny but unmistakable. "God knows it is the only reason you people come here." I watched the argument escalate. I saw the way Victoria crowded my personal space. I saw the way I backed up, trying to de-escalate, trying to leave, and then I saw the shove. On the witness stand, Victoria had claimed self-defense. She claimed I was attacking her. The video showed the truth. I was retreating. Victoria lunged. She shoved me hard. I stumbled back, my hip hitting the console table. I saw my younger self raise a hand to steady myself, a defensive gesture. And then, the slap. It was brutal to watch from a third-person perspective. Victoria wound up and struck me with enough force to snap my head to the side. The sound was a sharp, sickening crack. I saw myself recoil, clutching my mouth. I saw the blood start to drip almost immediately. "Jesus," Noah hissed behind me. But the video didn't stop there. I watched the box tumble. I watched the tag flip over. I saw myself stare at it. I saw Victoria follow my gaze. Then, the theft. Victoria didn't just pick up the box. She scrambled for it like a desperate animal. She snatched it up. She ripped the tag off with a violent jerk of her hand. And then came the audio that would bury her. "You ungrateful little brat!" Victoria screamed. her voice distorting the microphone levels. "You do not deserve anything from the one who chose you. You are nothing." I froze. "Play that back," I commanded. Lila rewound 10 seconds. "You do not deserve anything from the one who chose you." I looked at Noah. She quoted it. She quoted the tag. In court. She said she never read it. She said she just picked it up to keep it safe. But she read it aloud. She knew exactly what it said, and she hated it. "There is more," Lila said grimly. "Look at the stairs." She pointed to the top right corner of the frame. Standing in the shadows of the landing, holding a glass of scotch, was Daniel. He was there the whole time. He watched his wife strike his daughter. He watched her steal the gift. He didn't move a muscle to help me. After I ran out the front door, after the door slammed shut, the camera kept rolling. Victoria was panting, clutching the box to her chest. She looked up at Daniel. "She saw it," Victoria said, her voice shaking with rage. "She saw the tag." Daniel walked down the stairs slowly. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask about the blood on the floor. "If the old man finds out you hit her," Daniel said, his voice low and cold, "he will cut us off. He will rewrite the will tonight." "He won't know," Victoria snapped. "She is gone. She won't come back." "What is in the box?" Daniel asked, nodding at the package in her arms. "I don't know," Victoria said. "But if he sent it to her directly, it is not just a necklace. Daniel, it is leverage. I am going to make sure she never sees it." She turned and ran up the stairs, clutching the box. Daniel stood in the foyer alone, took a sip of his drink, and then walked toward the living room to turn off the lights. The video ended. The silence in the lab was absolute. "Leverage," Noah said, testing the word. She knew, even then, she knew it wasn't a normal gift. "We need a subpoena," I said, standing up. "We need this video authenticated by SafeNest and submitted to Judge Brooks by tomorrow morning. This proves perjury. It proves assault. It proves spoliation of evidence." "Already drafting it," Noah said, pulling out his phone. "But Melissa, there is something else." Lila cleared her throat. "The video is the smoking gun for the assault, but it doesn't explain what happened to the box. So I kept digging. I ran a cross-reference on Victoria's movements in the week following that Christmas." She pulled up a new window. It was a series of bank records and still images. 2 days after Christmas, Lila said. December 26th. Victoria visited the downtown branch of First National. That is Leonard's bank. She clicked on a grainy black and white photo. It was taken from a bank security camera. It showed Victoria standing at the counter. She was holding a large handbag, but on the counter, sitting right in front of the teller, was a small brown box. "The same box?" "She tried to open it?" I asked. "No," Lila said. "She tried to use what was inside it." Lila pulled up the teller's incident log from that day. Banks keep records of everything, especially denied transactions. Customer: Victoria Hale. Attempted to access safety deposit box number 402. Presented a key claiming it was found in father's possessions. Access denied. Name not on authorized signatory list. Customer became irate and was asked to leave. I stared at the screen. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with the force of a collision. "The key," I whispered. "The Christmas gift. It wasn't a trinket. It was the key to his safety deposit box." "Box 402, Noah said, reading the screen. "That is Leonard's personal vault." "Leonard sent me the key," I said, my mind racing. "He wanted me to open that box 10 years ago. He wanted me to see what was inside. Victoria stole the gift, opened it, found the key, and realized what it was. She tried to loot the box before Leonard even died. She thought if she had the key, she could get in." "But she didn't have the authorization," Noah said. "Possession of the key isn't enough. You need to be on the signature card." "So she kept it," I said. "She kept the box and the key, hoping she could find a way in later, or maybe she destroyed it to make sure I never got in." "We need to get into box 402, Noah said, urgency entering his voice. If Victoria tried to access it 10 years ago, whatever is in there terrified her. I am the executor, I said. I have the legal authority to open it now. I just didn't know it existed. Leonard's main accounts were at a different bank. This was his secret vault. We go tomorrow, Noah said, before court. I didn't sleep that night. I paced my living room. The image of Daniel standing on the stairs replaying in my mind. If the old man finds out, he will cut us off. He had bartered my safety for his inheritance. He had watched me bleed and calculated the cost of the rug. At 8 a.m, Noah and I walked into the First National Bank. The air was cool and smelled of money. I presented my credentials, the death certificate, the letters of administration, and my identification. The branch manager, a gray-haired woman named Mrs. Gable, looked at the paperwork and nodded. I was wondering when someone would come for box 402, she said softly. Mr. Whitlow was very specific about it. Specific how? I asked. He came in about a week before Christmas, 10 years ago, Mrs. Gable said, leading us toward the vault. He rented the box. He put something inside, and then he gave us a specific instruction. She stopped at the heavy steel gate and punched in a code. The gate swung open. He said, I am mailing the key to the only person I trust. If she comes, let her in. If anyone else comes with this key, turn them away. And someone else did come, Noah said. Yes, Mrs. Gable said, her face tightening. His daughter. She was quite nasty when we turned her away. She claimed the key was hers, but Mr. Whitlow had been very clear. We walked into the vault. It was a room lined with hundreds of small metal drawers. Mrs. Gable walked to row 4, drawer 02. We have the master key, she said. Since you are the executor, we can drill the lock if the original key is missing. It was stolen, I said. Drill it. A technician was called. It took 10 minutes of grinding noise that set my teeth on edge. Finally, the lock clicked, and the technician slid the long metal drawer out. He placed it on the table in the private viewing room and left us alone. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I looked at Noah. He nodded encourages. I reached out and lifted the lid of the metal bond box. It wasn't full of cash. It wasn't full of diamonds. There was a single, thick manila envelope. It was sealed with red wax, stamped with Leonard's initials. On the front of the envelope, in Leonard's shaky but distinct handwriting, were the words, "To be given to Melissa Robbins only in the event of a will contest, or upon her specific request after my death." I ran my fingers over the writing. He had foreseen this. He had known. With the terrifying clarity of a judge who had seen the worst of human nature, exactly what his daughter and son-in-law were capable of. He knew the gift might not reach me. He knew they might steal the key, so he had created a failsafe. He had placed the truth in a vault and rigged it to explode only if they attacked. He knew, I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. He knew they would come for me. Open it, Noah said softly. I broke the wax seal. The crack sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. I reached inside. My hand brushed against something hard, a plastic case, and paper, a lot of paper. I pulled the contents out. There was a DVD labeled Statement of Intent, December 2014. There was a stack of documents bound with a clip. And clipped to the very front was a photograph. It was a picture of the gift tag, the original tag. Leonard must have taken a picture of it before he wrapped the box. To Melissa, from the one who chose you when no one else did. I stared at the photo. The tag that Victoria had ripped up and burned in the fireplace existed here, pristine and whole. I looked at Noah. His eyes were wide as he scanned the top document in the stack. Melissa, he said, his voice shaking with awe. This isn't just a letter. This is a holographic codicil to his will. It is dated the day before Christmas. He wrote this right before he mailed the box. He pointed to a paragraph in the middle of the page. I, Leonard Whitlow, being of sound mind, do hereby declare that I have sent a key to this box to my granddaughter, Melissa. If this box is opened because my daughter, Victoria Hale, or my son-in-law, Daniel Hale, have contested my will, Then let this document serve as my final testimony against them. I picked up the DVD. This is the end of their story, I said, and the beginning of mine. I put the documents back into the envelope. I held it against my chest. It felt heavy, not with paper, but with justice. We need to get to court, I said. Judge Brooks is waiting. Victoria is going to wish she had never walked into that courtroom, Noah said, closing the metal box. Victoria is going to wish she had never met me, I corrected. I walked out of the bank into the morning sun. The rain had stopped. The air was crisp and cold. I touched the scar on my lip one last time. It didn't throb anymore. It felt like armor. I was no longer the defendant. I was the prosecutor, and I was about to deliver the closing argument of a lifetime. Back in the safety of Noah's conference room, the atmosphere was not one of celebration. It was the heavy, sacred silence of a cathedral before a eulogy. The rain had stopped outside, but the gray light of the afternoon filtered through the blinds, illuminating the metal bond box sitting in the center of the mahogany table. We had the Safe Nest video. We had the bank records. But this box was the voice of the dead. Noah set up a laptop and inserted the DVD we had found inside the wax-sealed envelope. He plugged in external speakers so we wouldn't miss a whisper. "Are you ready?" he asked, his hand hovering over the space bar. I took a deep breath. Gripping my pen, I was a lawyer, and I needed to treat this as evidence. But I was also a granddaughter who hadn't heard her grandfather's voice in 3 years. "Play it," I said. The screen flickered to life. Leonard Whitlow appeared. He was sitting in his study, the familiar wall of law books behind him. He looked younger than I remembered from his final days. His eyes were clear, sharp, and commanding. He wore his favorite cardigan, the navy blue one Ruth had knitted for him. He looked directly into the camera lens, and it felt like he was looking right at me. "My dear Melissa," Leonard began. His voice was steady, possessing that deep, gravelly timbre that used to command respect in his courtroom. "If you are watching this video, it means 2 things have happened. First, I have passed on, and second, the peace I hoped for has failed." He leaned forward, folding his hands on his desk. "I am recording this on December 20th, 2014, in 4 days. It will be Christmas. I have prepared a gift for you, a small brown box. I have placed a tag on it that speaks the truth of my heart. But inside that box, I have not placed a necklace or a check. I have placed a key." I let out a shaky breath. "I intend for you to open that box in front of your father and stepmother," Leonard continued. "I want you to ask me what the key is for, and I want to tell you, in their presence, that it opens a vault containing the entirety of my estate plan. I want to give them one last chance to see that I trust you, and only you, with my legacy." Leonard paused. A shadow of sadness crossed his face. "However, I have spent 40 years on the bench. I know human nature, and I know the nature of my daughter, Victoria. There is a high probability that you will never get to open that box. I fear she may take it. I fear her greed may override her decency. And if she does take it, she will be stealing the very key that could have started a conversation." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Sss. I have created this fail-safe. I have placed the duplicate key, the documents, and this video here in a vault she cannot access. If you are sitting here now, watching this, it means Victoria stole the gift. It means she chose greed over family, and it means she has unwittingly initiated the protocols I am about to explain." Noah paused the video. He looked at me, his eyes wide. "He set a trap," Noah whispered. "He knew. He turned the gift into a character test." "Keep playing," I said, wiping a tear from my cheek. Leonard on the screen picked up a document. "This is a codicil to my will," he said. "It is a supplemental document that I am signing today, in the presence of 2 witnesses, Judge Franklin Cole and my physician, Dr. Howard Ellison. Their signatures are here. They have also attested to my mental capacity on video, which is included on this disc." He held the document up to the camera. "This codicil contains a specific clause. In legal terms, It is called a no contest clause, or a no contest clause, but I call it the greedy hand clause. Leonard's eyes hardened. It states that if any beneficiary challenges the validity of my will, or attacks the character of the primary beneficiary, you, Melissa, they shall immediately forfeit any and all bequests they might have otherwise received. Furthermore, if such a challenge is made, the entirety of the assets that would have gone to them shall be liquidated and transferred immediately to the Ruth Whitlow Scholarship Fund. I gasped. He disinherited them, I said. If they sue, they get zero, and the money goes to charity. It is tighter than that, Noah said, pointing at the screen. Listen. I am doing this, Leonard said, because I need to protect you. I know they will call you manipulative. I know they will say you isolated me. So, I have prepared an accounting. The video cut to a close-up of a ledger. Leonard's voice narrated over it. For 20 years, Daniel and Victoria have treated me not as a father, but as a mobile bank account. I have tracked every request, every lie, every manipulation. On the table in front of us, I pulled the physical stack of papers from the envelope. It was the statement of intent. It was devastatingly detailed. October 4th, 2005. I read, Daniel requested $12,000 for a bridge loan to save his company. I later discovered the money was used for a down payment on a boat. March 10th, 2009. Victoria requested $8,000 for medical procedures. Insurance records show no claims. Credit card records show a purchase at a luxury spa in Europe for the same amount. Page after page, date after date, it wasn't just a list of numbers. It was a chronicle of betrayal. Leonard had annotated each entry with his own thoughts. They only call when the balance is low. He had written in the margins. They ask about my health only as a preamble to asking for a check. I felt a mix of vindication and heartbreak. He had known. All those years I thought he was being fooled. He saw everything. He was paying them off to protect me, to keep them away so I could have a stable home. I looked back at the screen. The video had returned to Leonard's face. And finally, Leonard said, his voice dropping to a whisper, I must address the events of tonight, or what I fear will be the events of tonight. He looked down at his hands. Ruth called me an hour ago. She was crying. She told me what Victoria did to you the last time you visited, the insults, the cruelty, if they are willing to physically or emotionally harm a 19-year-old girl over a gift. Imagine what they will do for an inheritance. He looked up, and the fierceness in his eyes made me sit up straight. If they hurt you, Melissa, they get nothing. That is my decree. This box, and the evidence within it, is your shield. Use it. Do not let them rewrite history. Do not let them paint themselves as victims. He reached out and picked up a piece of paper. It was a photograph. He held it up to the lens. It was a picture of the gift tag, the original tag, before it was tied to the box. To Melissa, from the one who chose you when no one else did. I chose you, Leonard said, his voice thick with emotion. I chose you the day your parents drove away and left you on my porch. I chose you every day I paid for your school instead of their vacations. And I choose you now, to carry on the legacy of decency that your grandmother and I built. He smiled, a sad, sweet smile. Do not be afraid of them. Melissa, you are smarter than them. You are stronger than them, and you have the truth. Goodbye, my dear girl. Make me proud. The screen went black. The room was silent for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the laptop fan. I sat there, tears streaming freely down my face. I didn't wipe them away this time. I let them fall. I felt a profound sense of release, as if a weight I had been carrying for a decade had finally been lifted. He hadn't left me alone, even in death. He was standing right beside me, handing me the ammunition I needed to survive. Noah cleared his throat. He looked shaken. That codicil, Noah said, his voice rough. It is bulletproof. He had Judge Cole and Dr. Ellison witness it on camera. There is no way Colton Price can argue lack of capacity. Leonard is more articulate in that video than most people are on their best days. And the ledger, I said. tapping the stack of papers. It proves financial abuse. It proves they were exploiting him, not the other way around. It destroys their entire narrative. But the kicker, Noah said, is the tag. He picked up the physical photo of the tag that was in the envelope. Victoria denied knowing what was on the tag, Noah said. She lied under oath, but the video from SafeNest proves she quoted it, and this photo proves Leonard wrote it. It connects the violence of that night directly to the inheritance. I took the photo from him. I stared at the handwriting. From the one who chose you. They wanted a fight, I said softly. They wanted to destroy my reputation. They wanted to strip me of everything. I looked up at Noah. The sadness was gone. In its place was the cold, hard resolve of the investigator Leonard had trained me to be. They have no idea this exists, I said. Victoria thinks she destroyed the tag. She thinks she hid the box. She thinks the only record of that night is her twisted memory. She is walking into a massacre. Noah agreed. When we present this, Melissa, it is over. Not just the case. Their reputation, their social standing. They will be ruined. They ruined themselves, I said. They did it 20 years ago when they chose money over their daughter. Leonard just gave them the rope. I stood up and gathered the documents. I treated them with reverence. This wasn't just paper. It was my grandfather's love letter and his declaration of war. We need to file this immediately, I said, but we do not show it to Price yet. We wait until court reconvenes. We wait until Victoria is back on the stand. Ambush? Noah asked, raising an eyebrow. No, I said. Justice. I want her to lie one more time. I want her to dig the hole so deep she can never climb out. And then, I want to play this video. I looked at the black screen of the laptop one last time. Thank you, Grandpa, I whispered. I walked out of the conference room. The dread that had been following me since the trial began was gone. I wasn't the defendant anymore. I was the executioner of their lies, and I couldn't wait for tomorrow morning. The air in courtroom 4 had shifted. The humidity and smell of stale coffee were gone, replaced by an electric tension that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I sat at the defense table, my hands resting on the cool mahogany, feeling the weight of the metal bond box sitting between Noah and me. It looked innocuous, just a gray steel container, but inside lay the ruin of the two people sitting across the aisle. Victoria and Daniel looked confident. They were chatting with Colton Price, likely discussing how they would spend their settlement money. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet had already turned to quicksand. All rise, the bailiff announced. Judge Brooks took the bench. She looked tired, her eyes scanning the room with the weary patience of a woman who had heard too many lies in her career. Mr. Mercer, Judge Brooks said, looking at Noah, you indicated you have a motion to present before we resume testimony. Noah stood up. He didn't smile. He didn't posture. He simply picked up the metal box. Yes, Your Honor, Noah said. The defense moves to introduce new evidence into the record. This evidence was recovered yesterday from a safety deposit box belonging to the decedent, Leonard Whitlow. We request permission to play a video testament and submit a holographic codicil found within. Colton Price shot out of his chair as if he had been electrocuted. Objection! Price shouted, his composure shattering instantly. Your Honor, this is an ambush. We have not had time to review this evidence. Discovery closed weeks ago. This is highly irregular. The evidence was discovered pursuant to a court order regarding the SafeNest security footage, which was also only discovered yesterday. Noah countered calmly. It goes directly to the heart of the plaintiff's claims regarding capacity and undue influence. To exclude it would be to suppress the final wishes of the deceased. Judge Brooks looked at Price, then at the box. If this evidence speaks to the decedent's state of mind, Mr. Price, I am going to hear it. Overruled. Proceed. Mr. Mercer. Price sank back into his chair, his face paling. He whispered something urgent to Victoria. I saw her eyes flick to the box, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear. First, Noah said, we called Dr. Howard Ellison to the stand. Dr. Ellison walked up, looking grim but determined. He swore the oath. "Dr. Ellison," Noah asked, "you are one of the witnesses to the codicil found in this box. Can you verify Leonard Whitlow's mental state at the time it was signed?" "I can—" "Doctor," Ellison said, his voice booming in the quiet room. "I conducted a full neurological exam on him 10 minutes before he signed it. Leonard Whitlow was as sharp as a tack. He knew exactly what he was doing. He told me he was signing a fail-safe because he feared his daughter would try to steal his legacy." "Thank you," Noah said. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we would like to play Exhibit D, the video testament of Leonard Whitlow." The lights in the courtroom were dimmed. The large screens on the walls flickered to life. When Leonard's face appeared, a collective gasp went through the gallery. It was like seeing a ghost. He looked dignified, sitting in his study, staring straight into the camera. "I leave everything to Melissa." Leonard's voice filled the room. "Not because I was forced, and not because I was manipulated. I leave it to her because she chose to stay when the others chose to leave." I watched Victoria. She was staring at the screen, her mouth slightly open. Daniel was looking at his shoes, refusing to meet the gaze of his dead father. "My daughter and son-in-law see me as a bank account." Leonard continued on the screen. "They have extracted nearly $1 million from me over 20 years. I have kept the ledgers. I have kept the emails. They did not love me. They loved my checkbook." The video cut to the close-up of the ledger pages, showing the dates and amounts. The jury was leaning forward, their eyes wide. The narrative of the loving daughter was dissolving in real time. "If they are challenging this will," Leonard said, his voice hardening, "it means they have stolen the gift I sent to Melissa. It means they have proven themselves unworthy of my generosity." The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "Your Honor," Price stammered, standing up. "This video, there is no way to prove when it was made. It could have been coerced. We object to—" "Sit down, Mr. Price," Judge Brooks said, her voice like ice. "The metadata has been authenticated by the bank's security logs. The video was sealed in a vault 10 years ago. Unless you are suggesting Ms. Robbins has a time machine, the evidence stands." Noah didn't let up. He was a shark smelling blood. "We have one more video, Your Honor," Noah said. "The plaintiffs claim that on Christmas Eve, 10 years ago, Melissa Robbins was the aggressor. They claim she was violent. They claim she stole a gift intended for Victoria Hale." He paused, looking directly at Victoria. "We would like to play the cloud backup footage from the SafeNest security system at the Stonehaven Hills residence, dated December 24th. Victoria let out a small, strangled sound. She grabbed Price's arm. "Stop it," she hissed, loud enough for the front row to hear. "Do not let them play it." "I cannot stop it, Victoria," Price whispered back, pulling his arm away. He knew the ship was sinking, and he wasn't going down with it. The screen lit up again. The footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed the foyer, it showed the tree, it showed me, 19 years old and terrified, and it showed Victoria in her red dress. The sound of the slap echoed through the courtroom speakers. Crack! Several jurors flinched. Then came the theft. The video showed Victoria lunging for the box. It showed her ripping the tag off. It showed her clutching it to her chest like a trophy. "You ungrateful little brat!" Victoria's voice screamed from the speakers. "You do not deserve anything from the one who chose you." The quote hung in the air. "From the one who chose you." The video ended. I stood up and walked to the witness stand. I didn't wait to be called. It was my turn. "Ms. Robbins," Noah said gently, "you just watched that footage. Is that accurate to your memory?" "It is exactly how it happened," I said, my voice steady. "I went there to make peace. She hit me. She stole the box because she saw the tag. She knew what it meant." Noah walked to the evidence table. He picked up the piece of paper we had found in the envelope, the photograph of the original tag. He put it on the projector. The words appeared on the screen, 10 feet tall. "To Melissa, from the one who chose you when no one else did. The plaintiff testified she never read the tag, Noah said, turning to look at Victoria. She testified she simply picked up the box to protect it, but the video shows her quoting this exact line. He turned back to me. Ms. Robbins, what did that line mean to you? It meant everything, I said, looking at the jury. My parents left me when I was a baby. They chose their careers. They chose their lifestyle. Leonard chose me. He was my father in every way that mattered. Victoria couldn't stand that. She couldn't stand that he loved me more than he loved her. So she tried to destroy the evidence of that love. Your witness, Noah said to Price. Colton Price stood up. He looked at the video still frozen on the screen. He looked at the judge. He looked at the jury, who were now looking at his clients with open disgust. No questions, Price mumbled, sitting back down. But Noah wasn't done. He recalled Victoria to the stand. She walked up slowly. She looked small now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the cornered look of an animal. Mrs. Hale, Noah said, holding the photo of the tag. You testified yesterday that you acted in self-defense. You testified you never read this tag. You lied to this court, didn't you? I was confused, Victoria stammered. It was a chaotic night. I didn't remember. You quoted the tag as you ripped it off the box, Noah roared, his voice filling the room. You screamed it at a 19-year-old girl you just assaulted. You knew exactly what Leonard was saying, didn't you? I was angry, Victoria cried. You were greedy, Noah shot back. You saw that tag, and you knew it meant he had chosen Melissa over you. You knew the gravy train was ending. You stole that box to hide the truth, didn't you? No! Then why did you go to the bank 2 days later? Noah asked, holding up the bank log. Why did you try to open Leonard's safety deposit box with the key you found inside that gift? Victoria froze. She didn't know we had the bank records. You stole the key, Noah pressed, leaning in. You tried to loot his vault before he was even dead. You didn't care about him. You only cared about what you could take. He was my father, Victoria shrieked. He owed me. He spent all that money on her, on that ungrateful girl. I deserved that money. I built that family. I will not let that little brat rob us of what is rightfully ours. The courtroom gasped. She had said the quiet part out loud. What is rightfully ours, not love, not legacy, possession. I looked at Daniel. He had his face in his hands. He was weeping. Not for me, not for Leonard, but for the realization that his life of ease was over. No further questions, Noah said, dropping the photo on the defense table. Judge Brooks didn't even call for a recess. She adjusted her glasses and looked over the top of them at Victoria and Daniel. I have heard enough, Judge Brooks said. The evidence presented today is overwhelming. It is rare that a court sees such a naked display of greed and malice. She picked up the codicil. Leonard Whitlow included a specific in terrorem clause in his codicil. Judge Brooks read, It states that any beneficiary who challenges the will, or who attacks the character of the primary heir, shall forfeit their entire share. She looked at Victoria. Mrs. Hale, not only have you challenged the will, you have perjured yourself in my courtroom. You have admitted to assault. You have admitted to attempted theft of a safety deposit box. The gavel hovered in the air. I am upholding the will and the codicil in their entirety, Judge Brooks declared. Because of your actions, the bequest of $500,000 that Leonard had originally left for you is hereby forfeited. It will be transferred immediately to the Ruth Whitlow Scholarship Fund. Victoria let out a sob. Furthermore, Judge Brooks continued, I am dismissing the plaintiff's claims of undue influence with prejudice. I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay all legal fees for the defense, and I am referring the video evidence of the assault and the perjury to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Bang. The gavel sounded like a gunshot. It was over. Court is adjourned. The room erupted into chaos. Reporters were shouting. Victoria collapsed into her chair, sobbing hysterically. Colton Price was packing his briefcase with the speed of a man fleeing a sinking ship. I sat still for a moment, I looked at the metal box. I touched the cool steel. "We did it, Grandpa," I whispered. Noah smiled at me. "You did it, Melissa. You stood your ground." We walked out of the courtroom. The double doors swung open, and the flashbulbs blinded us. But this time, I didn't look down. I looked straight ahead. We walked out onto the courthouse steps. The rain had stopped, just as it had in the video. The sun was breaking through the clouds, casting a golden light on the wet pavement. "Melissa!" I stopped. I turned around. Victoria was running down the steps after me. Her mascara was running down her face. She looked like a ruin of a woman. Daniel was trailing behind her, looking like a ghost. Victoria reached for my hand. I pulled it away. "Melissa, please," she sobbed. "Please, do not let them take the house. We have nothing else. The legal fees. They will bankrupt us." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had made my childhood a lonely waiting room. I looked at the woman who had slapped me and stolen my gift. "That is not my problem, Victoria," I said calmly. "But we are family," she cried, grabbing at my sleeve. "I know I made mistakes. I know I was hard on you, but mothers and daughters fight. We can fix this. We are still family." I looked at Daniel. He looked at me with pleading eyes. "Melissa," he whispered, "please." I thought about the empty chairs at my graduation. I thought about the checkbook ledgers. I thought about the tag. "No," I said, my voice clear and steady in the crisp air. "We are not family." I stepped closer to her. "Family doesn't hit you on Christmas Eve," I said. "Family doesn't steal a gift from a dying man. Family doesn't drag you into court and lie about your sanity to steal your money." I remembered Leonard's words. "Family," I said, "is the people who choose you when everyone else leaves. You didn't choose me. Victoria, you chose the money, and now you don't have either." I turned my back on them. "Goodbye," I said. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking on the stone. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see them crumble. I had the truth. I had the memory of the two people who had actually loved me, and for the first time in my life, I was entirely, completely free. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and vindication. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe winding down for bed? Please let me know in the comments below to connect with our community. If you enjoyed seeing Melissa take back her power, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share this story with even more people. Your support means the world to us.